All righty, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is our third episode of Tempest Games Live, and today's a very special episode. It's going to be our first designer interview we've actually held, so please bear with us, be kind. This is the first time we've done this, but I'm excited about having John Gorkowski here with us today. We're going to be talking a lot about what John's done, and as well as his future design plans. So first and foremost, I want to please welcome our guest, John Gorkowski. How you doing, John?
I'm fine. I hope you can hear me. And I have to say thank you for hosting. This is really terrific. Great backdrop.
It's great to have you here. And we've got a good audience already, both on Facebook and live using our Zoom broadcast. So just to let attendees know, if you're on Facebook Live, you can post comments or questions on the Facebook feed itself. I'll do my best to see if I can review those questions as the page refreshes on Facebook. But also for those that are actually in our Zoom webcast, you'll notice you have a small little interface and toolbar at the bottom. And what you want to look for is there's a Q&A. There's a Q&A option. So this really is for you. So I do have some questions that I'll ask John, but it's really a chance for you to ask John any questions you'd like. And the way you ask questions is you'll click on the Q&A button that you should see in your toolbar, and then you can submit your questions. And I'll be keeping an eye on any questions that come up. So I'll be watching multiple screens here. So bear with me while I try to navigate Facebook and your questions on our webcast. So what I'd like to do first, before we get started, is we're going to actually start with some poll questions, John. And the reason we're going to do poll questions is because I've heard people post and say, these interviews are so lame, they're so boring because they're always the same questions over and over again, like what's the first game you played and all that. So the trick is I'm still going to ask lame questions, but I'm going to flip it around and put it on the attendees. So I'm going to launch the first poll here, and we're going to be asking attendees some fun fact questions about yourself, okay? So we're going to launch this poll, and again, those that are on the webcast right now, you probably see a screen that's asking you 2 questions about John, and you've got to do your best to answer these. So I'm not going to do it the boring old-fashioned way to just tell you the answer. You're going to have to try to guess what the answer yourself is. So I'm going to go ahead. We've got one answer in already, so somebody's paying attention. So again, this is for the people that are on the webcast. You'll see the poll questions coming up, and then those that are on the Facebook feed. So welcome Mark Merritt, Alan Rothberg, and Sergio. We've got some people on Facebook Live. You can answer these questions too. I think you see the poll questions in Facebook Live. There might be a delay, but if you do see them, you're welcome to answer them. If they're not showing up because you're not part of our webcast, which might be the case actually, then you get to sit back and relax. So I'm going to end the poll now just so we can share the results. So here's the results. So as you will see here, and John, this is where it gets exciting. I'm going to let you provide the answers here of what the correct answers were. So the first question for you is, who was the first wargamer that influenced you as a designer? And we have...
speak to that?
Yeah, would you like to give the answer to that first question?
The correct answer is number 3, Gary Gygax.
So everybody literally almost failed this first question. You've all failed and let us down already, see?
Well, what's interesting about this is a lot of people don't realize he started as a war gamer, and then he became, famous for another product. But he began by playing, cardboard battles of Gettysburg.
Okay.
He even wrote articles for his local hobby newspaper.
Well, you stumped everybody except for one bright person out there. Somebody gets bonus points. So we're going to see how we did on the next question. So we have another split mix, and we have, again, the last answer is actually just the one person thought it was War and Peace. So what's the answer, John, to number 2? What was the first war game you've ever played?
War and Peace. And,
War and Peace.
I remember this because I got that when I was about 11.
Okay.
And it was, at that time, you could buy it in Toys R Us, and it had a great cover. So back then, they had some great marketing, and retailing was very different.
So what we don't know, what the big $64 question is today, is we don't know if it's the same person that is the only one that got those both questions right or not. It could have been 2 different people, or it could be just one one relative of yours, your brother or mother or somebody's on here. So, all right. Well, that was just a little fun, but I hope it's a nice way to sort of ask those basic questions in a little different way. So let's dig a little bit deeper. I want to talk a little bit about your game designs. And I have a question for you, actually, I'm going to ask now. And again, anybody's welcome to ask questions anytime. If you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to do so. So tell us a little bit about your first published game design.
Okay, well, the first published was published by a desktop publisher who published on demand. So that was In the Trenches. And that was Eric Grenier, who used to run a game company but doesn't anymore. And that was 2009-ish, 2010-ish.
All right, less than 10 years ago. Okay.
Right, not long ago. And he basically did me a service by publishing that. And there was no payment for me. I was just happy to have some publicity.
Yep.
And after a couple of years, that design got some traction. And when I approached other companies, they would reference that design. So that's a good way to go. Just start out with a free product and get some recognition, and then you work your way up to publishers who can do better quality products.
Any particular challenges you faced the first game design you did that was published? Any big learning curve you had to deal with personally?
I don't think it was a big learning curve, but it was definitely a learning experience. And I submitted my first designs, to at least 10 companies. And so it's just a story of rejection after rejection after rejection. But what I appreciated was that I often got a comment with that rejection. And I actually modified the games based on those comments.
Very smart.
And so I found that very constructive to get turned down with some advice.
Very smart.
Over time, I was able to make a more acceptable product.
That's great. Well, let's do this. We're going to delve a little bit further into your game design background, and we're going to do that by launching another poll. So we're going to challenge our viewers again. So we make everybody work here. You don't just show up at a webcast and sit back, have a Pop-Tart. We don't work. We don't roll that way. So you have to work. So those that are on the webcast right now, you should see a poll question. And of course, you could cheat. You can go to Board Game Geek and maybe cheat on the first question here about how many games John's actually had published already. But again, we're going to ask you how many do you think he's published without looking at Board Game Geek for the answer. And also, interesting question here, because we're going to talk about future work. How many game designs do you think John is working on right now or has formal commitments to deliver for publishers? So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now. Got some good answers here. So let's share the results. So hopefully you see the results of this new poll. And let's go to the first question first, John. Looks like most people think you've published 11 to 15 games so far. So why don't you share with us how many games you've had published so far?
Well, I think the number is 23, but I have to confess, many of those use the same system. So 23 products, but conceivably fewer quote-unquote games.
Okay, interesting. So a little errata in our webcast here.
Right.
Now we're going to have to post errata to the Compass site. So we're going to go with 23, and the reason we'll go with 23 is I don't want Board Game Geek to get mad at us and say we're liars. And so Board Game Geek has you down for 23 products, and I saw one was like a module or an add-on and things like that. So that's a lot for within 10 years. So that says you started in 2009?
Yeah, well, I probably started,
and you've done
started 2008.
2008, 10 years. So that's pretty fast. So as a first-time designer, 10 years, and you've got over 20 products out already. So that's a pretty impressive thing to hear. Well, if you're doing that much already, I think the next question will be interesting, and that is how many designs are you presently working on or have formal commitments to deliver to publishers? And right now, looks like most people are guessing, 3 of them said 5 or more, and 5 others thought it was just 3. So what's the correct answer to?
Correct answer is 3.
Oh, we have quite a few people, 5 people.
Yeah. Somebody's paying close attention.
So there's some no limited intelligence on that one. Everybody seems to know what you're working on. I don't know how that happened. So, so I think we're going to talk about some of these future titles actually in a little bit. So I think that's great. So thanks for providing us a little more background. And we're going to just go to the last poll. I promise this is the last one we're going to do. But I think it's also important to learn a lot about the attendees that we have online today. So we're going to ask 3 questions of our attendees who are on our webcast. So you'll see the 3 questions. So the first question to ask, how long? So this is also for the Facebook Live folks, because you might not be able to see the poll questions on Facebook Live. So for those on Facebook that are watching, if you want to provide how many years have you been active in our hobby? So just how many years have you been a war gamer? You could just put down the number for how many years. The next question for those that are on Facebook is, how many Compass game products do you own? So if you're on Facebook, you can just type 5 Compass games, and we'll know that stands for number of games versus number of years. And then I'll get to the third and last question in a moment. So we're asking those questions now. We're going to give everybody time to, since there's 3 questions here, let's give a little bit more time for people to answer all 3 of the poll questions. And there is counting involved. For the first question, you have to count how many years you're actually been a wargamer. So that's some complex math and algorithms that I want to give people time to do. All right, so we're going to go ahead and end the poll now, if that's okay, everybody. So as far as some of the people we have online right now, we have a sort of a split as far as number of people. I'll share the results. So the number of people that are have been gaming for 6 to 10 years, we have a few there, and then we have 31 plus years, which that sort of puts them in my camp, I guess. You know, the aging grognard, if you will, more than 3 decades. We have a number of people there. Number of Compass games that people own. So very excited to hear that everybody has been a customer of Compass. Everybody's bought something, it looks like. So 5 or less. We have 6 to 10 and 11 to 20. So some big supporters of Compass games. So thank you for your support to Compass games. And then this particular question is of most interest for today, because we asked, do you own or have you played any of these John Gorkowski designs? So half of you said you've played Breaking the Chains. Half of you have played Volume 1 of the Red Poppies campaigns, or you own it. One of you owns or has played Volume 2. So we need to keep those orders going, because it's the latest, greatest. Red Poppies campaign just came out a month ago or so. So we want to get more people saying, yes, they have it. And oh boy, South China Sea, that sort of blew everything up in the water. So I think we're going to talk about South China Sea next. So nearly everybody has played or owned South China Sea. So that gives us some good background about everybody. So that's what I'd actually like to do next. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Let's go here. And we're going to talk a bit about some of your design work, John, if we can.
Okay.
So first thing I want to do is we're going to talk about, we're going to go back a little bit. And the reason I want to talk about Breaking the Chains first is I received a lot of questions when South China Sea started shipping last summer. Well, I have Breaking the Chains already. Why do I need South China Sea? Or what's the difference between, tell me the difference between Breaking the Chains and South China Sea. Gamers, I think they're very common, tons of overlap. So they were asking me, and I'm not the best person to do that. That's why you're here. They're asking, what's the difference between these 2 games? What does one get with each? And what are the key differences between both titles?
Okay. Well, South China Sea has a tighter scale and a streamlined sequence of play compared to Breaking the Chains. So Breaking the Chains shows a larger area of Asia on its map, but each hexagon represents more space. And so you don't get as much detail. I think in Breaking the Chains, each hexagon is about 75 nautical miles.
Okay.
And you can see you have from the southern tip of Japan all the way down to Singapore. So it gives you more scope, but less detail. And the sequence of play in Breaking the Chains is a little bit more structured, a little bit longer.
Okay.
more procedural. So South China Sea took the lessons that we learned from Breaking the Chains and essentially made a very similar game, but it zooms in on the Spratly Islands, so the scale shrinks from 75 to 45 nautical miles per hex, and you lose the depiction of Taiwan and everything north.
Okay.
And you focus instead more closely on the South China Sea, and we streamlined the sequence of play. So really, Breaking the Chains was the first effort to model that situation. South China Sea was the second, and South China Sea benefits from all the lessons learned from play of Breaking the Chains. So I'm happy to report that we actually do read comments, and we actually do make edits based on what people say about gameplay.
Right.
And one of the things that's special about South China Sea is it was tested by staff members and students at one of the war colleges.
Oh,
so it was really terrific to have so many people with so much military background poring over the design. And in fact, they've since used it as a launching pad to make their own version for their own purpose. So I think our hobby design benefited from that cross-pollination with the military gamers and vice versa. And it was very instructive for me to interact with that group and interesting to see how their perspectives differ from the perspectives of hobby gamers.
Okay. Well, I think it was very successful. I noticed since I joined Compass in the summer, that was the first game I noticed that just seemed to be taking off online with comments, and Facebook was pretty much on fire, showing people playing it on weekends and posting pics, and it was getting really seriously a lot of discussion. So whatever, I don't know what caused that big movement, but it seemed like people were finding out about South China Sea, and they were really taking to it. Like it was, the orders were just, and I know with Compass HQ, they were saying, oh boy, this thing's taking off. And that's one thing I want to ask you about, because when you have a game that really takes off like South China Sea did, and nothing against Breaking the Chains, again, great design, but obviously South China Sea really garnered the most attention for sure online. What's next for South China Sea, if I may ask?
Yeah, the next game in that series is going to be called Indian Ocean Region. Okay. And we're well along on that design right now, and it aims to simulate hypothetical future contest and conflict in the Indian Ocean, situated around the String of Pearls. Sure. And I don't know how familiar the listeners are with the String of Pearls, but China has started to develop commercial port facilities at key points along the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, and it's possible, it's plausible that at least some of these facilities could be dual use. They could be converted to military applications, and there's some other diplomatic and political developments out there that are changing the balance of power and creating a situation where the Chinese are essentially projecting power across the Indian Ocean for a variety of reasons, at least one of which is quite understandable. They want to protect their own sea lanes of communication, and protect all that oil that they bring in from the Gulf and from Africa.
Okay, I want to check something real quick. John Allison, who's joined us, thanks for joining us, John. You raised your hand, and it looks like you might have a question. So if you raise your hand again, John Allison, and you'd like to talk and ask a question, if you're connected with a microphone, please feel free, and I will connect you to if you want to ask your question. Otherwise, for those that are in the conference, we have that Q&A button. So if you want to ask questions of John, please click on the Q&A button that you'll see in the interface and ask your question there, and we'll ask that question of John. Also, for those that are on Facebook Live that we're streaming right now live, please post your questions. I do see the comment thread. I see we have quite a few people that have joined, so thanks to everybody who's joining us right now, watching us now on Facebook Live. So if you have any questions, feel free to just post your comments and questions on Facebook Live, and I'll be sure to get to them. So, and again, for John Elston, raise your hand. Let me know if you do have a question, or just post your questions, and I'll be sure to get to them. Before we do some sharing, I know you want to do some show and tell today with us, John, about the next installment for South China Sea. I have a general question for you first, because we're talking about future conflicts, and I think that's a very popular area as well. So I have a question for you. How do forward-looking designs about future conflicts, like the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean that you're working on now, how's that differ from doing simulations about past historical battles?
Well, I like that question because it gets to the core problem. When you look at a past historical incident, you have a lot of very credible information. And so you may not know exactly which military unit was at which point at which time, but you have high degree of confidence with a lot of them. And you also have a lot of historical analysis explaining reasons for victory and things that contributed to defeat. When you look to the future, all of that becomes very fuzzy. So there's a whole lot of speculation. And this creates a problem for a designer, because as a designer, you have to ask yourself, do I want to imagine a particular sequence in the future and then let the players explore only that, or do I want to set some broad parameters?
Right.
And let the players explore a range of possibilities within those parameters. And so it's a different kind of problem, and it's a lot of fun to deal with, but it's definitely different.
Great. Well, listen, did you say you would have anything that you'd like to share as far as the Indian Ocean game you're working on now?
Well, I can see, let me see, I'll share screen.
All right, so we're looking right now. I'll let you go ahead and explain right now. It looks like we're looking at card sheets 1 and 2, and you can zoom up like you're doing now. And
yep. So here's some, these games begin with some preliminary card play. And this is sort of to set the stage and to make people aware of what might lead to conflict. And so you can see for Indian Ocean region, we have cards that cover movements in and around the line of control in Kashmir. So there could be tension between China, India, and Pakistan in and around Kashmir. And then we have some cards for terrorism, because in Indian Ocean region, we have those states that are considered sponsors of terror. So those states might play cards for terrorism. And then we have some typical political and military events. We have a South Asia strategy, which is something the U.S. touted a few years ago. It's a new approach, unified approach to South Asia. We have combined military exercises, which are critical to getting militaries to work together. Mm-hmm. High-level visit, counterterrorism. Let me see if I can bring out the others.
How many total cards are there going to be? Just
around
curious.
40. We should have around 40 cards.
40 cards, okay.
Yeah. And here's some more cards. And what I like about this is this gets into some of the more contemporary diplomacy. This card here, debt trap diplomacy. There's been some writing lately about certain powers deliberately getting smaller countries in debt so that the smaller countries are then beholden to them. Here's a basing card where a major power might make a basing arrangement with a minor power. Somali pirates. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of card I have some fun with, Trojan tourists. And this is sort of really pushing the limit with imagination. But, there's a set of islands called the Maldives, south of India, okay, that have, in the last couple of years, exhibited great receptivity to China. And this has been quite a surprise to India, that once wielded great influence over the Maldives. And the Maldives receive quite a lot of Chinese tourism. And at the same time, Chinese interests have bought up significant property in the Maldives. So, little fiction here. We imagine a future where they might have, military personnel posing as tourists, able to travel the region and enter a place like the Maldives in great numbers without being detected. And that's what that card would simulate. So those are some of the card options.
Where are you in the stages of development? How far along is this?
I think the rules are 90% done. We
Okay.
just need to lay out the scenarios.
Okay.
The cards are 90% done. Just need to finish a few more. And the counters are all planned, as is the map, but I need the artist to set to work on the map and counters. And he's scheduled to begin in June. And he's a big fan of South China Sea too.
Okay, great. Okay, sounds like things are moving pretty fast. And so next month, so you're saying next month for the Indian Ocean game, next month we'll start artwork. So
Correct.
Pre-production artwork, getting the files ready. So counters are pretty much set, probably the map's obviously set, and you've got the game cards obviously right here. Are there going to be any other major components you still have to work on as far as the player aid cards or anything else?
Yeah, I'll have to work on the player aid card, but that's very quick. I just cut and paste essential elements of the rules.
Okay.
And Compass assembles those very quickly. And because it's a cousin of South China Sea, player aid card is going to very much resemble what's already available in South China Sea.
Great. Any particular design challenges or big decisions or things you've had to focus on around this latest design? Anything come up yet that you've spent the most time on? Or
yeah, this one is tricky because the distance we're covering is so vast. We're probably going to have more map space than we had in South China Sea.
Okay.
And you also have to design scenarios so that you get to the action more quickly, so that less time is spent sailing at great distances. So the space issue is a new thing. The South China Sea is a very confined region, whereas the Indian Ocean region is quite vast by comparison.
That sounds great. I noticed we have Tom Russell joining us today from Holland Spiele. So welcome, Tom. I'm going to give props to Tom because he writes some very interesting blog entries around design approaches, and they're featured on Consum World, which I post quite often. So it's great to see Tom here, and those that aren't familiar with Holland Spiele. You should know about Holland Spiele already. I expect you do, but be sure to check out Tom's work with Mary. And that sounds great. So what I'd like to do in the interest of time, because you've got so much going on, let's switch gears for a moment. Unless you've got something else to share, I don't want to cut you off as far as the next South China Sea title.
Do you think I can close this window without losing you?
I would go ahead, and if you want you stop sharing, because I'm going to share a little bit about the next title we're going to talk about here. So what I want to talk about now is something, again, looks like most people had Volume 1 already, and here I'm showing Volume 2 of Red Poppy's campaign. So I think what's really interesting about this is has there been much talk at all about World War I tactical? I'm I'm thinking back.
It's very limited.
And there's Land Ships by, I think Perry Moore was the one.
Yeah, Land Ships was a Clash of Arms, I guess.
Clash of Arms. But
and before that, you had Soldiers.
So we're aging ourselves, because I think that's over 2 decades ago.
It's been a while.
Quite detailed, but Land Ships strikes me as the closest thing thematically to sort of what Red Poppies looks like.
Correct.
But I know there's, for example, there's Great Combat Commander, or I'm getting it wrong. I'm getting the title wrong, but I know there's the combat.
Yeah, I think they call it Great War Commander.
Thank you. Great War Commander has been done, and that's done very well. But so we haven't spent a lot of time in our hobby really talking about tactical World War I. I've personally enjoyed Soldiers from SPI quite a bit, but that's a more beer and pretzel or 70s era generic battles theme. Whereas, well, let's do this. Why don't you take it away?
Okay.
And, I'll stop sharing again in a moment, but I'll show the components while you're talking about. Let's talk about your first release, the Volume 1, just for a moment. That set the stage for this Volume 2 release, which came out, very recently. Came out in the last 2 months, I believe. So talk about how you got into World War I tactical combat.
Well, I got into World War I tactical combat because of Land Ships, the game Land Ships.
Oh, there we go. So yeah,
I started playing that maybe 2005-ish, and I was disappointed in that it was the game was generating very ahistoric behavior. For example, you would run your machine gun units up and attack with them, which was really completely inaccurate for World War I. They didn't even have light machine guns until the second year of the war, and then they were very rare. And the earliest machine guns used in the war, they typically weighed 80 pounds, and some of them were pulled on sleds. So, and they weren't used as, you know, forward assault weapons. They were used as miniature artillery. And that's just one example of how land ships was generating ahistoric.
Okay. So in other words, we're going to slam past designers just because we're.
Well, I'm not trying to slam them.
I'm joking. No.
Yeah, this is why it's good that we have a process where we can build on earlier designs, because I saw that and I said, hey, I want to construct a game where you're compelled to move the pieces in a more historically accurate way.
Right.
And so I thought about what was driving what went on in the war, and I did a lot of reading. And then from that reading and from my lessons playing land ships, I developed the Red Poppies system.
So what lessons were learned, and what did you hear back on volume 1? Because you've published a second volume now, and
right. The lesson from all the reading is that in the First World War, fire trumped maneuver. And, you know, this is something a lot of us don't pay much attention to because we're so accustomed to games that simulate World War II and the Battle of the Bulge, where it's all about fire and maneuver. But World War I was, the maxim is fire trumped maneuver. Also, concentration was critical to facilitate command and control in the First World War, but that's why we had so many casualties, because dispersion is what keeps you alive. So the belligerents in the First World War had to resolve those two problems. And I tried to do that with the way the pieces function. On the side you see now, what we call the formed side, this represents the company, their companies, formed up in a way that's conducive to top-down command control. Now, once a company suffers an adverse result, it flips to its dispersed side, where the troops have sought their own safety and cover. And they're more difficult to control, but they're also more able to persist. They're better at surviving. And so, in a sense, the flip side of the pieces is the Second World War. The front side of the pieces is how the First World War began. And then during the war, you know, you have to flip these pieces and deal with these issues. Some of the lessons learned communicated to us by players as a consequence of the first edition were mostly rules tweaks, seeking clarity on how to implement certain rules like melee. We also, from the initial version, we modified artillery slightly, and we've moved on now to tanks. Last Laurel's at Limonova, which is the current iteration of the game, that Volume 2 is about the Eastern Front. You know, a rare topic of a rare topic. And that's some cavalry and some long-range operations. And the one under development now is assault artillery, which is going to feature French tanks in 1917.
Well, let's segue into that, because I guess the question I would ask is, how limitless are your thoughts about, I'm really curious of how far you're going to take this series, because first of all, with showing the components I showed, the front of the counter sheets we showed, and the map's gorgeous. I think this system just begs to have multiple battles covered, and I don't know what clip or speed you're going to go, and what your plans are of how many World War I battles you want to do, and what sizes of battles you want to do, but it looks like it's just itching and begging to just be something that could really take off. So yeah, why don't you share with us what your grand plans are, as well as what you're actively working on right now for what's next for the Volume 3.
Well, the grand plan.
Feel free to share too if you want to share your screen and you want to show anything. Feel free to share stuff.
The grand plan is to, maybe produce one every couple of years. It takes quite a bit of research, and I've been fortunate to have great artists. Early on, some terrific artists played the game and then volunteered to work on it, and this has made a huge difference. The current product is assault artillery. It's about a French battle in near the end of 1917. Montalmaison, I think it's pronounced. It was fought near the Chem de Dam Ridge, which had been the center of contention for a few years prior. And it was a battle where the French used 2 different types of tanks, Saint-Chamond and Schneider.
Okay.
And so the game has, I think, about 30 or 40 tank pieces.
Oh, interesting.
And, fairly simple rule set, but it highlights the main features, armor at that time, one of which is propensity to break down. And so very frustrating exercise for the French player.
Oh.
That's a lot of
breaking down a lot, huh?
Yeah. That's a lot of what the game is. Managing these command and control issues, malfunction, failure, and when the plans go off the rails. That's what the game is about, a lot of that. I would also
sounds like the vehicles, you're adding a new aspect to the design with the vehicle breakdown and that being...
Well, you don't have to add a new aspect, because I designed the game so that you could simulate a breakdown just by having the piece flip.
I see. So it's not adding a bunch of chrome rolls. It's sort of...
it's quite simple. You just make what they call a cohesion check. A cohesion check is usually induced by enemy fire.
Yeah.
But it can also be induced by crossing a difficult obstacle.
Oh, interesting.
And fail it, you break down. So it's a very easy way to get that in play. And I was going to say, long term, I would welcome any kind of contributions from the wider community. Last weekend at the hobby meeting, I saw a group of guys playing Last Laurels at Limonova. And one of them mentioned to me that he thought some of the battles in East Africa would be great. And, yeah, I mean, that'd be great. So I'm happy to work on it, but I would not object.
we've got to solve this problem, because you said at the beginning of this segment you're good for one every few years because of all the research, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah,
we have to have more games from you. We can't have one every 2 or 3 years on this system.
I can try to speed it up.
That's a call to action for those on this webcast that are going to be watching later as well. Anybody with research who wants to do what kind of research? Order battle, basically, the terrain analysis unit. I assume it's just your standard. It's like the flip side of the conversation we had earlier about how our futuristic designs or potential conflicts. How do you go about designing games on potential conflicts versus historical battles?
Right. It takes a lot of OB research. Have to dig down into the orders of battle. A lot of, like you said, map research. Yeah. And you can obtain period maps, and those are pretty important. And then a lot of reading of after-action reports or first-hand accounts, or just history books, to get some good perspective on what was really happening, and try to interpret that in terms of the game. So it's just quite a lot of research in each one of these.
I'm going to plead that our listeners or viewers are going to help you with the research. One every 2 or 3 years is not fast enough for us.
We can try to pick it up.
Problem.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this before we wrap up. I do want to ask you, what other designs are you presently working on? I believe also you've got one coming out shortly from Holland Spiele, The Lost Provinces, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's one we've been working on. That's a lot of fun. That's the Japanese. No, that's the Thai invasion of French Indochina.
Oh, interesting.
In I think it was December of 1940, but shortly after the fall of metropolitan France, under Japanese tutelage, the Thais asserted some territorial claims against French Indochina.
What's that publishing? I know Tom's here online. He could probably type me an answer, but do you know what the publishing timeline is as far as
I don't know.
As far as Lost Provinces goes?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to Tom on that.
Okay, we'll defer to Tom on that one. We'll see how fast a typer he is. Wink, wink. He says July with an exclamation point.
Oh, great.
So that means it will not delay. It will not be August. It will be July. So anything you have to wrap up with Tom, you've got less than 60 days to do that. Just so you're on a schedule. So, for Compass Games, are there other publisher games you're working on? You mentioned there's 3 projects, but is there anything else?
That's it. It's Indian Ocean region, Assault Artillery, and the Lost Provinces. So
that's the 3.
That's the 3.
So if we get a bunch of order battle research, we can add another 5 World War I games next week.
That's ambitious.
Right? Okay. So Compass has something they do, quarterly. We do every few months, Paper Wars. I'm curious, do you know if you're going to be contributing anything, or do you have any plans, or do you have any wishes of what you'd like to contribute to Paper Wars as far as articles go? Because you've got, a few released titles now. I don't know if you'd consider like adding scenarios or doing something to South China Sea if it needs something, or an article about upcoming design, like your design notes, like Tom Grant, he publishes his blogs, weekly, or does his podcast talking about what they're designing. And I'm wondering, for Paper Wars, are you thinking of doing any contributions there in the future?
Yeah, I'd like to, when I carve out some time, I'd like to do an article on the Indian Ocean region. And I'd also like to do some scenarios, for South China Sea and the Indian Ocean region. It would be fun to periodically produce a new scenario or two going forward. So yeah, I'd like to do that. I just need to carve out some time.
Okay, and I think I may have forgotten this, but correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to show for Red Poppies, the third, the artillery. I don't know if there's any.
Let me see if I could share a file from Assault Artillery.
Yeah, I think there was. I didn't want to skip over that, and I think people would love to see if there's anything.
Yeah, let's see.
As far as files go, it looks like I see some map images there. Oh, map images. Yeah, maps. You've got to show maps. You've got maps. You've got to show the maps. It's required.
Yeah, this is fun. This is another. I think this map was done by Francois.
So tell us a little bit about this. Looks like it's a detailed view of about 8 hexes down by 8 across, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's correct. So there you can see the Shemdadam Ridge, and these are wrecked villages. You can see the trenches.
Okay.
And the blue trench is where the French start. And they're up in the upper left there. There's a fort that was occupied by the Germans.
Oh, nice.
If I draw out.
Yeah.
You get some more view here.
Okay.
What's interesting is you can see we have a ridge line running right across the center of the map.
Right.
And in the lower left and the upper right, the ground gets lower. So there's this contest for the ridge line. And beyond the ridge, in the German position, there's some wooded area. And so this is another Western Front battle, but it'll feature tanks, and it has an unusual feature in the terrain, which is stone quarries. And I'll try to go.
Oh, the vehicles are not going to like the cohesion check on that.
Yeah, right.
The French vehicles, you mentioned the 2 types of tanks, that's going to be a cohesion check, I assume. That's not good.
Going into, forbidden from going into the quarry.
Well, that's even, see, there you go, even worse. Yeah. You can't even try to go there.
What's good about the quarry is it's, and this is again from historical research, the records refer to the ability of the quarry to hold a battalion. So you could basically double the hex capacity for infantry in a quarry, and it's excellent protection. These were the quarries. I think you can see maybe these brown, fuzzy brown areas.
Yeah, I see those too.
Yeah, they were heavily fought over because they were good defensive terrain features.
Interesting.
Now, when it comes to tank breakdown, it's worth noting around the trench, you can see all these little craters or shell holes.
Yes, yeah, I see that. Yeah, in the map detail.
An easy way to introduce some historical detail is to require the Saint Chamond tanks to make a cohesion check every time they enter a crater hex.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah, whereas the
French players not going to like you as a designer.
The Schneiders don't have to do that, so they're much more reliable.
See, there you go. Well, that's what I mean. This is exciting. I think, South China Sea, like I said, that was a runaway hit. And I just think there's not much on World War I tactical right now. Great War Commander.
Right.
And so, and this looks great. I mean, what you've got working here, yeah, I'd love to see whether it's East African, like you mentioned earlier, or some other Western Front, or I'd love to see some Eastern Front stuff even. I mean, it just sounds like there's so much, but yeah, the order battle research and all that, obviously it does require some time and resources to do that. But boy, it sure looks wonderful to play. Absolutely. Anything else you want to show? I mean, the map's pretty tough to beat there. Looks like. Well,
let me see if
I'm sold on it.
Let me see if I can bring up some counters. Let's see.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's see. I'll have to go back to here. Now, There, can you see those?
Not yet. I see them. Let me see. Yes, we see the counters now. Yes, we see.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, what's interesting about these is we don't have the tanks yet.
Okay.
But what we do have is you can see right next to the night attack.
Yeah.
To the left of it, I have a German counterattack company, which you can see has a different set of numbers than the company below it, which is a reserve company. So, we distinguish between the different troop types, and the counterattack company is much better than the reserve infantry company. We also have, here in the lower right, we have some French engineers and some French flamethrowers. So this game has some really interesting unit categories that demonstrate how the opposing forces started to use.
This looks great. So it looks like actually the counter art's already done or almost done. It looks like you've got so some of the work's already started. It looks like based on this counter art. This looks like final artwork.
Oh yeah. This is nearly finished. I'm just waiting on the tanks.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So here's some good news I want to share. So we have our first official victim. So Mark Merritt says that, well, thanks, Mark, for being here, and thanks for saying it's a good discussion. That means you're listening to him, not me. That's why it's good. So that's great. So Mark says he'd love to help with some of the modules, particularly Somme and Verdun. So
okay.
some big kahuna modules there.
Yeah.
So Mark, I'm gonna capture your notes and everything, and we'll pass it on. We'll have you connect with John, and we need to get this order of battle stuff taken care of. So we need more of this stuff. So this is looking too good. This is as you can see, I like World War I infantry style, infantry tactical. I like that a lot. So I'm not gonna hold back any type of efforts we do there. So, well, this is great. This is great, John. I think if you don't have nothing else to share, you can probably stop your sharing now, and then
okay.
I'm just going to turn it over to you. We'll do a final wrap. If anybody has any questions on Facebook Live, please post your questions. If anybody has any questions who's part of our webcast, you can post your question in our Q&A area right now. But if there's no questions coming up in the next few seconds, we're going to get ready to wrap up. So just any closing thoughts, John, as far as just working in general with Compass Games, how that experience has been? You've done a few titles with Compass now. Sounds like you're working with some artists as well. How's that been working out for you?
I think Compass is the best company I've worked with. It's been a really terrific experience. So hats off to the whole team at Compass, and Ken Dingley has been terrific.
Yeah.
And you hosting this podcast is amazing. And I have to thank you for the whole Consim World thing. So you've really made quite a contribution to the whole hobby. So it's been a very positive experience.
It's my pleasure. And like I said, I know there's a lot of great publishers out there, and it's a privilege for when we can publish one of your designs, and it's great to see Tom also publishing your work. And it's great that there's the hobby seems very healthy in terms of a lot of publisher options for designers these days. So it's great to see that. It's nice. Oh, John Vogel just purchased South China Sea, so that paid for your. That paid for my attendance fees, right? You're too much. You're too expensive. So thanks to John Vogel for just picking up South China Sea. That covers me for the next year. My expenses are fully covered, John. So thanks for doing that. So I want to say, John, thanks for being our first official victim of I think it's always good to meet people that are behind these great designs that we get to enjoy, and being so connected with the online communities, asking questions, answering the rules questions and things that come up. We've learned a lot today. We've learned about your background. You've just been publishing designing for 10 years, which is amazing. You've got over 20 titles. You've got 3 in the works. You've got South China Sea was very hot. Now you've got the Indian Ocean coming next, and we just talked about the Red Poppies campaign, the next title there, and hopefully with Mark Merritt's help and some other people's help, we can order a battle work done faster. Are there other eras or things of interest you have, things that you're not signed up to do that you're interested in looking at one day if you had the time? I'm just curious if there's anything else you're interested and pursuing as a designer? And we'll close with that question.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is sort of grand strategic World War II in the Pacific.
Grand strategic World War II in the Pacific. All right.
Very tough topic, and I've actually made some designs, but I didn't like them, so I left them on the shelf. So that's the holy grail for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're going to hold you to it. I'm working with Gregory. Just so you know, I'm working with Gregory Smith right now in a very simple, nice, playable Pacific game, and there's going to be a European version that's like card driven, and it's going to be a lot different probably than your game for sure. It's going to be I think it's going to be something interesting. So definitely looking forward to your game on that. So any thoughts on when you might start that work? Are you still reading books about it, or?
Well, it's been ongoing for like 5 or 6 years. I think I'm on my second or third design. I just don't like the products, so I let them wither on the shelf. Because it's really a tough challenge because the distances were so great and the unit sizes were so varied. It's hard to make a game that gives you the right level of detail and feel.
Gotcha.
So it's ongoing.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to do is let's do a check-in again maybe in a few months when we get closer with one of your upcoming releases, whether it's for the South China Sea next installment or the next installment for Red Poppy's campaigns, or maybe some news about Pacific. Let's get you back here. I hope everybody enjoyed the session today. We learned a lot again, and I'll go ahead and I'll post a slightly edited version without all the noise at the back end, front end of it. And this was very enjoyable for me, and I hope everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed the session today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, John, for doing a great job today. And I think this will help us get more designers. See, you did such a great job that I think we can get other people to say, I want to do this too. So
jump in.
We want to share with the gaming community what other projects we have going on at Compass. So thanks again for being here. And I want to thank everybody for being on Facebook today and for those that joined our webcast. So with that, we're going to say adieu and goodbye. And you take care, John. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Until next time.
Take care. Until next time.